Hi, welcome to Detours Understanding Acquired Brain Injury. And leaving love languages behind, perhaps for a little bit at least. Want to introduce, of course, you recognize our lovely co-host Lisa, who's done a
Hello.
great job with the love languages, and um, it's necessary and want to thank her for helping us with love languages because those are important things for us to all consider. And the fact that who we are after brain injury changes. But we're going to be getting back to other aspects. We had originally or before spoken about um, physical changes to expect after brain injury, but some of the most disabling and profound changes after somebody suffers acquired brain injury or survives, bless you, acquired brain injury are cognitive changes, changes to thinking, cognition referring to thought, thinking. And so I understand we're going to be talking about changes in cognition to expect when a survivor comes home. And it doesn't matter whether it's a so-called mild traumatic brain injury, concussion, mild TBI, or severe. There are cognitive changes, and they can be rather profound. They can be significant changes, and oftentimes they're surprising. So, Lisa,
Okay.
lead this one. Let us talk about the symptoms. And next episode, we'll be
Yes,
talking about things you can do at home to help. And just so you're not surprised about some of these things. Mm,
exactly. Wow. Whew, there's a lot of symptoms that
yeah.
a patient will have, brain injury patient will have. Basically having to make decisions on things. Um, overstimulation. If something's like too much for them, depending on what it is. What else? Whether they can talk or not, that's another big one.
Mm,
Because if they can't talk, well, hopefully eventually they're able to, but when they do come home, they might have some symptoms from the injury. And that's where, you'd have to like use sticky notes for them to
mm.
communicate. Um, basically, what else? Oh, let's see. Just trying to think for a second. Neurofatigue.
Now, that is a one to maybe want to stop and talk about that for a moment. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of people after traumatic brain injury has to do with the fact that um, when you suffer brain injury, your brain has to rewire itself. And I do have a video about neurofatigue, about fatigue in general. It's not as electrochemically efficient. And so things that seem like simple tasks um, tire a person out with brain injury, leave them very exhausted very quickly. Mental tasks as well as physical tasks make them tired just in a couple minutes, in an hour or two, especially at first. It sometimes gets a little better, but they become tired quickly and they don't have the energy. And so they'll say, I'm tired. And you're like, wait a minute. Like you woke up, an hour or two ago. How can you be tired? And it's because their brains, the wiring is less efficient. It would be kind of like if you had to send electricity from Canada to Florida. The what would arrive would be a lot weaker, and it would be not. You really couldn't run a large city or anything like that. And that's kind of like how it works with your brain, because you have to send the energy for a greater distance than it should have to go. But when you rewire your brain through rehabilitative techniques to make up for what's literally lost, neurons that are not there, you are less electrically efficient and therefore don't have the oomph to function for as long or to concentrate or to focus or to think or to stare at a computer screen or play a game
Mhm.
or to just talk and function. You just don't have the poop that you're used to. And so frequent
Exactly.
rest and stuff like that It's just like it
It's
is.
very hard.
It is hard. Like if I don't have, it's like there's certain days I just don't have the smoke, and I can't
Mm.
motivate myself to. If you look at Mark's mechanical pencil theory on another one, I talk about like some days I got extra oomph, other days I've got less than my usual oomph.
Oh,
And it's
yes.
just like some days I could go like, it's like I feel like I go a full 24 hours. I got other days,
Mhm.
if I can go 2 hours, forget it. Those are not work days for me. Those are not good work days. And I don't know which days are going to be great, which days are going to be shit. And that's
Very
just the
true.
honest to God truth. And it's like, and I don't know what day is going to be what. Heaven help me if I have to go to work on those days. God.
Mm. That is
Or
so true.
I mean, I can already feel my batteries are really low, but I'm going to push through this because I want this to be, and because it's an important topic. But neurofatigue, that's one of the big killers. Ugh.
Oh, yes. And also, what another symptom is there, I know it's going to be an emotional thing, but how they're going to react to
Mm,
family members. Some can have the agitated, be
mm,
agitated,
yes.
angry,
Hmm.
and then some could be as nice as ever.
Yeah. It is kind of cognitively connected because many times, like language, processing and understanding a word, language, communication, they
Yes.
may not understand what is meant. Um, what I'm, what we're not talking about like as far as referring back to not talk and things like that, usually that would be a very extreme case where they have an aphasia, either Broca's aphasia, where they cannot make the right speech sounds. They will
Mhm.
usually get a speech language path. So usually that is the most extreme cases, like where aneurysm or speech language path or stuff where they can't talk at all. That's highly
Okay.
unusual. Global aphasia, where they lose both the understanding and the ability to talk. I know one lady who really has true global aphasia, where she can barely say a word and really doesn't understand language. She's in a world of, silence, both of understanding and speaking. But that is very, very unusual. Most of us with traumatic brain injury can talk, and we talk just fine. Some of us way too much. It's called logorrhea. I have that. I
Mhm.
talk way too much, and I don't have that signal that says "shut the hell up." They're bored. I can't read the signals. I don't have the ability. I lost that ability to read the signals. Somebody's got to say, "Dude, shut up."
Mhm.
Um, and if you're not too rude about it, okay, yeah, it's time to stop. It's not intentional. It's not meant to be rude or a jerk.
Oh,
I just sometimes don't get those social cues. And that is also something else about cognition. This is going to be
yes.
very disorganized, what we're talking about tonight, because that is another symptom of brain injury. And these are called dysexecutive syndrome or dysexecutive
Yes.
deficit. And executive refers to the ability to plan and organize. Um, and that's usually messed up. A person with brain injury will feel an awful lot like a kid with hyperactivity, ADD, ADHD. Why?
Yep.
Because it's the same, usually the frontal lobe, the area right behind your forehead. And with brain injury, because that's the largest of your lobes, the ones that control thinking, planning, coordinating, organizing, judgment, social skills, um, personality functions, which is a
Yep.
complicated area. Those kind of higher thinking functions are usually the ones that are most messed up.
Yes. And it's very hard for them because, they want to be able to do stuff,
Right,
but they don't know how to plan because they can't think ahead.
right.
They have problems, reading people or understanding what people are saying because they take it literally.
Hmm.
And then it's not meant that way, but it depends on how the person comes across.
And that's where getting angry with family members and friends and stuff like that. Because when I use this reference fairly often, it's like if somebody says, "You dog," they can mean it either insultingly or it can be kind of a strange compliment. Like if you do
Right.
something that is like you know, like amongst guys, like kind of like, I'm
Oh,
impressed with you.
yeah.
It can be a complimentary thing. It's like
Yep.
sneaky and hey, I'm impressed, or it can be an insult, but it can be taken two ways.
Yes. But that
Or
person will take it literally.
and they might take it insultingly and not
Yes,
understand that
that's what
it's
I
got,
mean.
yeah, exactly. It's got two meanings. And a
Yeah.
person with brain injury who's got cognitive problems and who takes things literally, they may say, but I don't have a tail. I don't have, it's like, bzz. No, that's
Yep.
not what's meant. And here's another challenge to that. One day they may get it, the next day they may not get it. And that
Yep.
ties into like neurofatigue and energy and focus.
Oh, yeah.
1 hour they may get it, and an hour later they may not. The
Hmm.
variability of performance, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down,
And
cognitive.
that's where also memory comes in too. They'll have
Oh,
problems
yes,
with their memory.
memory. You know about that, and so do I,
Oh,
both of
yeah.
us with brain injury. Um, that's something to mention. Both of us have brain injury here.
I mean, even like they might have good long-term memory to a point,
Mhm,
but like with like my problem, I do have good long-term memory for the most part, but my timing of like when certain things happened, I
mhm,
still have a problem with that because I can't remember, you know, well, was I still in high school when this happened? Like, or like, when I have a really good family friend, and it's like I can't remember when I was friends with her husband. I have no like,
mhm,
and then like my husband had to remind me. I'm like, oh, okay, okay. Like, and
mhm.
short-term memory, it's okay, but it's not great.
Right. My problems are my like I have a very good long term, like very good long term memory, but the problem is short term memory sucks. And so getting it short term memory or working memory, you may hear either one of those terms used kind of interchangeably, but it's not exactly true. Short term memory is simply storage. Whereas working memory is that ability to hold and manipulate information in there
Right.
for like accessing. And then there is immediate memory, which is visual or auditory memory for just a moment. And so there are different kinds of memory for different functions. Immediate memory is the stuff you use when you like see a phone number like flash up, or when you see a like something on the screen and you need to hold it like email
Yep.
address or whatever just for a
Mm-hmm.
moment. And then it moves to working memory. And that usually is okay for most of us, but not all. And the problem is our working memory or our short term. That usually is
Yes.
screwed up. That is a frontal function as well. As if you couldn't tell, most people's damage is frontal. That's serious because frontal is associated with like higher social skills. The ability to know that, what you're saying is not rude or offensive. Even if you don't mean it to be, most of us don't mean the stuff we say. It just comes out kind of stupid.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of like that 5-year-old kid who talks about fat lady,
Yeah.
and we don't know that we're not supposed to say that. It's not meant to be rude. We just don't have that duh filter, that
Oh,
tells you not to, oops.
mm-hmm.
It's, we
Absolutely.
all, part of it's we learn those skills. We learn those things as we grow up. But when you have
Mhm.
brain injury, you lose some of those learned. It's a kind of a memory in a sense,
Right.
but when you suffer brain injury, you lose that special kind of memory. That
True.
learned information is destroyed, so you have to reacquire it.
Oh, yeah.
It works like a type of memory. It's not like remembering, like that there's a tree out front of your house when you moved in third grade. It's not that kind of a memory. It's more of a skill type memory, more
Mhm.
like um, remembering how to drive or whatever, but it is a different kind of skill. And so it is more implicit.
Yes, that is
I
correct.
I know how to administer certain neuropsychological tests still, even though that was before I was hurt. So I retain my skill sets, it's like, but I have problems with the more fluid skills. That's
Mm.
common with brain injury. You retain your um, learned skills, your crystallized memories, usually, but not always. And that's a big asterisk with everything brain injury, usually, but not always. Because you can always find one or two examples of somebody who doesn't, somebody who, like with the soap operas where, oh, I don't remember who you are, and
Oh,
that kind of cheesy, you know what I'm talking about. They
oh, yes,
suddenly,
I do.
that is
And it
not
takes you
common,
all day to remember who they are.
right? And guess what,
Yeah.
though? That is not common. But does it happen?
Yes.
Yes. You got hit to the head with a branch fell off the tree, and now she can't remember, who the handsome man who's been. Does it happen like that? No. Can it?
Yes.
Yes. Is it common? No. But it makes for an
Hmm.
interesting storyline. Do you get hit by another branch and it all comes back? No.
That would not
Um,
be nice.
you usually if you get hit a second time, it just gets worse. But hey, it makes for a cheesy storyline. Which cheese seems to be a prerequisite for any soap opera. So yeah, I guess it's like so working memory problems, working memory problems, um, potentially some long-term storage problems. Usually those kind of memory problems are patchy. You got holes in your past, you're missing stuff. Now, some people do miss large chunks of their past,
Yes,
but it does come back over time often because
it does.
what's damaged isn't the memory storage themselves, it is the retrieval mechanism.
Hmm.
The hippocampus is responsible for assisting in the retrieval. It's kind of like those of you who are old enough who remember a card catalog in the
Yes.
library so you could find where the books are.
Hmm.
It's the card catalog that's been all the cards scattered everywhere. And so it affects your ability to locate where the books are.
Yeah.
Or those of you who are a little younger, than that, who are familiar with something called a domain name server, which is a special kind of server used by the internet to find the locations of URLs, to find where specific websites are located. You use a DNS, the domain name server, to help you find where that web address is. And so the when you ask, your favorite search engine to go find, it will look up like a phone book in effect, a computerized phone book in a sense, to go find where that web address is. It goes out, checks with the DNS, and it'll tell you, oh, here's where it is, and it'll tell the server to go find the DNS. Your hippocampus does that function, and it is often damaged in either hypoxia due to cardiac arrest, drowning, whatever. And this is why people with that kind of damage have trouble with retrieving memories, because this DNS or that card catalog, in effect, the hippocampus, damaged and has trouble retrieving those memories. But as it heals and gets better, recovers, because most of that kind of energy usually is more about an injury as opposed to destruction or damage. Um,
Yeah.
and then you can start to retrieve those memories because those are stored not electrically, but as physical changes, which is why you dream, by the way, in order to make those physical changes. That's a whole complicated bit of neurology, but we're not going there right now. But
Right.
as your hippocampus recovers, you then have access again to those memories. And that's why over months, weeks, months, even years, you'll notice your memories start to come back. You start to dream about stuff, and you're like, oh, that's because that system is coming back online. Also, because
Yes.
new neurons, you generate about 18,000 a year, not enough to heal your brain completely, but they're usually are dedicated to the hippocampus. Another reason. Okay. So little bit of
Yes.
crash neurology there. Um, which
One
reminds
of
me
the other
that
things I
it's,
wanted to bring up
yeah.
also is if you have occipital damage,
Ah, yes, yes,
and yes, it will affect your vision in
yes.
some way, shape, or form. So,
Yeah, definitely.
those who used to be able to drive may not be able to drive,
Yep.
or if they are able to drive, it may take a while
Mhm.
because if your peripheral vision gets affected, good luck. That could
Now,
take a while.
did you experience trouble with that?
Yes, I did, and I
Mhm.
still do to a point.
Okay.
Yes.
That's in the back of your head. The occipital lobe is in the back of your head. And it doesn't just affect your ability to see outright. It affects your ability to recognize what objects are. Um, the linkage between the occipital lobe and the parietal, which is one of the areas I had damage, helps you with processing, understanding language, mathematics. Um,
Right.
you will bump into people who have what's called agnosia, lack of knowledge is what it means. It's more, as those of you who know me know, I say this a lot. It's more complicated than that. What I'm talking about is there's visual and auditory and agnosia. There's also other types of agnosia. I've talked about that before. But for example, visual agnosia, you could show a person's pen and ask them, what is it? They do not recognize what it is. With visual agnosia, you can show them a key or whatever else visually. But what's interesting is if they grab it, hold it, they can tell you what it is
Right.
because recognition of the object is multisensory. And so even though their visual processing centers are affected, they somatically touch or like hearing it, sounds from it, they
Hmm.
do recognize. So usually it's like it's not. No. And you can also see this if the corpus callosum, which is a bundle of white matter that link the two hemispheres together, um, if that's called a disconnection syndrome, if it's severed, you may notice trouble recognizing in one hand versus the other things like that. Um, it's the same thing with reading, writing. They may not be able to read anymore, depending on
True.
circumstances, what's here, or mathematical abilities,
Mm.
which may affect their education and other, aspects like that. It is important to keep in mind that just about any skill set, cognitive skill set, could be affected depending on where the damage is. Um, they may have, it's like more than just some, of those higher processing skills. Um, Focus, sense of time, sense
Yes.
of like any of those kind of any thinking skills may be affected at all.
Oh, yeah.
And there's kind of some overlap in emotional and things like that too. They may not
Yes.
have the drive to do things. It isn't laziness, and this is kind of like between emotion and thinking again. Um, they may want to do stuff, they just cannot find the willpower to do it.
Right.
And this is called adynamia, the lack of drive. They want to get up and eat breakfast or whatever, for example. They just can't make themselves do it. And this is a complex kind of thing. They may be unaware that anything is wrong with them. This is
Right.
called anosognosia. I have actually a couple of my friends who are even on the YouTube channel
Hmm.
unaware that really anything is wrong with them, even though their deficits are obvious to everybody else.
Right.
It's called anosognosia, and it has to do with a problem with self reference. We all have like a self checking system that tells us how we're doing, how we're performing, and they don't get the feedback telling them, hey, maybe there's a problem. I have a video talking about which system is part of the medial frontal lobe. It's also part of the system that tells you maybe you shouldn't say that, maybe you shouldn't do that.
Right.
And so when you find a problem with one of these systems, usually they have problems with others like that, or that tells you you're not acting socially appropriately. And
Very
so if they have
true.
problems with the one, they generally have problems with the other. So they may be socially inappropriate. They may say
Right.
things that are rude or mean, or and it isn't because they mean to, it is because those circuits aren't working right, telling them don't do this. So you have to literally tell them don't. And this also ties in with problems with recognizing mistakes, um, that they don't recognize they are making errors. And they become
Yep.
defensive and upset when you point out that they're making mistakes. And I'm
Mhm.
not making any mistakes with this. You're wrong. No.
Yes.
The problem is the circuits in your brain that tell you you're messing up aren't working. And so you have to
Exactly.
be careful about like when you're dealing with this because, well, one of the best ways is to let them fail. And let them, as long as it doesn't kill them, maybe let them fail
Right.
spectacularly and let them fail often enough. Hopefully it'll sink in.
Oh, yeah.
If not, maybe you need to take that role away from them. And usually their memories suck enough that they won't notice.
True.
Um, Depending.
The other one that I thought of also is when they do things that they shouldn't do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Impulsiveness is a
Yes.
problem. No,
Yes.
yeah.
It could
Um,
either be one way or the other. It could either be
yeah.
hyper or hypo.
Yes. Yes, that's a problem too.
Oh, yeah.
You've never chased a naked lady down the street or down to the museum grounds. I have. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Impulsiveness. Yeah, that
Yeah.
can be a problem. Or like, yeah, yep, that definitely can be a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it happens sometimes. And I'll admit, sometimes acting impulsively without thinking about the consequences, that's a brain injury thing. I'm sure you've had, done that occasionally too. It's,
Yeah. A little bit. Very
yeah,
subtly. Mhm.
right.
Especially when you go
Well,
to the store.
yeah, that's something else too. And, it's just these things
Hmm.
happen.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
And so ultimately, what all this stuff boils down to, and we'll try to put like a list up or something,
Mhm.
just like maybe like attach a list or something to tell people, hey, it's this is not intentional. Okay, your brain, as I have said so many times, is basically a wet, squishy biocomputer,
Mhm.
and who you are, what you are, is a result of that the performance of that computer. Everything, every aspect of personality, every aspect of your essence
Mhm.
comes from the performance of that machine.
Very
Um,
true.
think of it like a projector projecting a movie onto a screen. Your personality, what people see is what's projected on that screen. But if you damage that projector, it will not perform like you would expect.
Exactly.
The person with a brain injury has a damaged projector. So don't be upset if what you see projected is not what you expect. It's not the fault of the person. It's not the movie is not a bad movie. Projector's damaged, and so understand there's no intentionality there. Usually, the person with the brain injury isn't even aware of what they're doing is so. A little kindness, compassion, and empathy is important.
Very
You know,
important.
and the other thing is like how much you should tolerate. Well, that's a decision you have to make. And so reach out to support groups and other people. If you're feeling overburdened, overwhelmed, you're a person too. And you have your own rights and you have your own like levels of what's right to tolerate. A
Very
disability
true.
disability is not an excuse for somebody to act like a jerk. Um, and if you come crashing into your limits, you've got to take care of yourself. I'm never ever one to say that a person with brain injury has a right to misuse you. They don't. And you have to decide where your limits lie. And if a person who has brain injury uses it as an excuse to treat you like an object or to kick you around, then go. Um,
Mhm.
you have a right to protect yourself. They don't have a right to mistreat you. And you do have a right to be a person, to be treated with love and respect back. But that being said, you also need to have the courage to talk to them, to tell them, to explain to them. Oftentimes, we don't know what we're doing. And it may not stick because of our memory problems and some
Yeah.
of our learning problems. And most of us don't mean to hurt anyone. You have no idea how often I apologize for messing up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you apologize for messing
Oh
up.
yeah, all the time.
And I feel guilty. I feel like 2 cents, and it's like, I didn't mean to, I didn't know.
Even
And
though
I
you
do,
didn't, but you feel like you did,
yes. And
you know?
I feel like I owe an apology because I don't want to hurt anyone. And I will mess up, I guarantee. And so will your loved one coming home from the hospital. They'll mess up a lot.
Oh
But what's most important is intent. Um, as long as it's not intentional, as long as they're not
right.
trying to hurt anyone, please give them a chance. Um, and be as understanding because they still are, it's the reason you made them your partner. It's the reason they're a big part of your life. It's because you care about them. The person they are still under there, just
Yep.
kind of maybe messed up. And as long as it's clear they're not intending to hurt, please,
Right.
be understanding. And if, it's like if you really can't reach them anymore, then yeah, maybe that makes sense to go. But, you know, unless it's clear it's intentional, then get some help for yourself. Turn to people who know, turn to support groups, turn to help groups, turn to others who've been through it. Get help, for your loved ones, psychiatric counseling. They can't do it alone. Get them the help.
Well,
And
that's another thing, is to, support their, them getting their help the help that they need.
yeah,
That's a big one.
yes,
And also, like, when we talk about, like, if they get angry,
mm,
if you know what their triggers are, you can
yes.
prevent that.
And we're
That's a
going to be
big
talking
thing.
about that. We're going to be talking about and ways to deal with that. It's called
Yes.
antecedent behavioral analysis, ABA. And I do have a video where I do talk about that a little bit. It's called antecedent behavioral analysis. And that is oftentimes things that make somebody angry or set them off. There are certain like things that set them up to be set off. And if you can find out what those are, you can prevent the triggering. And
Yeah.
you can also apply behavioral techniques, Skinnerian behavioral techniques, to reduce the likelihood of them being triggered by that in the first place. Some cases, medication is necessary too.
Yes.
It's a complex and a little psychological, but we don't mean to lose our shit. But it's more
It
like
doesn't take much, believe me.
no, it's not. Um, and you want to talk about making us feel guilty for the next 20 years? Yeah, but I mean, I think about times where I'm like, I'm really sorry. Holy crap. And yeah, I'll feel bad forever. But, it's like there are certain buttons, there are certain situations being overstimulated. And yes, we're going to talk about, you know, being overstimulated, too much input, too much light, too much sound, too many
Yeah,
people talking,
yeah.
too much happening
It's
at
too much
once.
to handle. That's where the neural
Yes.
fatigue comes in.
Becoming overloaded will
Yep.
trigger aggression and irritability and stuff again, not intended, not meant. And I'd be apologizing for the next 10 days and feeling guilty for the next 10 years, but still can trigger off. What's
Well, see,
important.
that's where the no filter comes into.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So when they used before the injury, when they were very nice about not saying certain things, well, I could tell you after the injury, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Believe
But
me.
of course, then they feel bad about it for next
No,
decade.
not all the time.
No,
Sometimes things are just meant to be said on principle alone.
the thing
Just say,
is that that is the way you end up losing people in your life. And
wow, that depends.
no,
If they know they did wrong and they deserve it, well,
uh,
as long as you
here,
say it nicely, that you have to. There's a
here's the
way to
thing.
say it and a way not to say it.
Here is the one thing about it. Negative attribution bias, a failure of reasoning that you see in cognition. If everybody's wrong, bad all the time, and you're the only one who's right, you're the one who's wrong.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Um, that is a red flag in defective reasoning, and a sign of brain injury too. A lot of people with TBI, everybody else is wrong. I'm only the everyone who's right, and a lot of self-centeredness in thinking. Um, as I said, disability is an explanation. It's not an excuse. If they're acting like an asshole, you definitely are licensed to walk away and give them a warning.
Mhm,
Tell them, you know, and this often leads a lot of people with brain injury alone,
mhm.
because
No,
they
I get that.
don't have good intent. And but you gotta have the courage to lay it out
Mm,
and say, this is why, and I'm history if this doesn't change. And then you gotta stick by that for a while.
mhm.
Let them get hurt, perhaps,
Oh,
because
yeah.
the self-centeredness they only learn if they suffer a little bit. Sounds mean, but you got to
Very
get through the
true, though.
concrete sometimes.
Mhm.
And I don't mean forever, but maybe a day or so. Find out that, oh shit, I can't cook. Oh shit, I can't do this. Maybe a little bit of an apology, maybe an effort to make things better. I see we're almost out of time. So,
Yeah.
pick up soon.
Oh,
And please share, like, subscribe, any questions, comments below. And
yes.
we'll pick this up and then we'll talk about strategies and techniques.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.